Hi, everybody. Welcome to Frequelize This. This is Rich, and these are my colleagues, Dave and John. Say something, fellas.
Hello.
All right, we're doing hand gestures instead. So, all right, thank you for joining us on Frequelize This. Today, we're going to continue our journey through the albums of 1971. This is a big old tournament that we're just trying to figure out in the opinion of the Frequelize group chat, which is about a hearty group of like 8 or 9 people, to figure out what the best album of 1971 is, since it's a seminal year in album rock and R&B, actually, because we have some R&B stuff going on here as well. So, John, why don't you tell us where we're at in the competition, since you are the Lord of the Excel sheet?
Thanks, Rich. So we are going to do round 2 of the losers bracket. That's where we're going to start. So we've already had a round of, the initial game, which was our episode 1. And then we've had a round of the losers bracket. And then we went back up to the winners bracket in episode 3. And we had another battle there that sent 8 more albums down to the losers. So we're going to be talking about 8 albums that have already been losers and they won, so they're still in it. And then we're going to be and they're going to be going up against the 8 albums that just lost in our previous episode. So Dave, you want to start us off on, it was game 33.
So game 33, you had Harry Nilsson and Nilsson Schmilsson going up against ZZ Top, ZZ Top's first album.
This one,
first of all, I'm going to give ZZ Top credit for Truth in Advertising with their album cover, with their album name.
Yes.
You got a little bit of it both. Nilsson Schmilsson and ZZ Top's first album. I mean, they just lay it out there. I got a band. We did an album. Here it is.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because by this time Nilsson was kind of known for having a sense of humor by some of the stuff that he had done at this point. So a name like Nilsson Schmilsson totally works. You know, ZZ Top is like, yep, this is our first album. More to come.
Yeah.
You know?
And the more to come is significant here because this is where we said goodbye to ZZ Top forever, at least for their first album.
Yeah, that's okay. They'll be back with Tres Hombres.
Yeah. So Nilsson won this one, and I think it's easy to agree with that choice, right? That the group made.
Yeah.
So,
and Dave, not only to get back to your Nilsson Schmilsson point, dude's wearing a bathrobe on the album cover. So,
yeah,
for the full effect.
Yeah. It's
I got
funny.
music. That's it. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's kind of saying, whatever. I guess I made another album. Whatever. Listen to it if you want. Whereas ZZ Top was like, here we are. It's our first album.
Yeah.
So Nilsson's what is that phrase? Self-deprecating, humor wins out over an earnest effort from our blues trio friends from Texas.
A little band from Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one. Oh, this one I feel like it also should be introed by Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is 2 bands, 2 albums that I personally love quite a bit. You got Santana with Santana 3 and Caravan in the Land of Gray and Pink. And if you've watched the previous episodes, you know I'm the Caravan fan, and I'm kind of pulling for the In the Land of Gray and Pink. But when it comes up against Santana 3, yeah, the right call was made on this one, because Santana 3 is the one that moves on and progresses. And this was, I mean, Santana as a band at that point, they were hitting on all cylinders. It is a really well done, musically exciting album. And honestly, probably the thing that's likely to appeal to more people. Caravan is kind of its own niche, and as much as I might love In the Land of Gray and Pink, I do recognize that I'm always going to be a minority in that.
Yeah, this I've said it before in a previous episode, so I won't belabor the point. But this competition where I listened to this Santana 3, that's what made me appreciate Santana. I only knew him from the hits he had in whatever that was, the 90s or something.
Yep.
And here I am finding out 50 years after the fact that, or more, that Santana is freaking awesome. So
yeah. Well,
that band there in the early 70s was fantastic.
A side question to that, John. Have you ever seen Santana's live performance of the Woodstock documentary?
I mean, it's possible because I know I've watched that, but I have not watched that in many years, which means that, I watched it when I was younger and kind of didn't know some of these artists,
Carlos Santana's like 19 years old. That's like,
wow.
It's like Bill Graham, like foisting Santana onto the world on Woodstock, and they do Soul Sacrifice, and it just shreds. It is, you can make an argument for it being the coolest performance of that original Woodstock.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just blisters. All right, so moving on to the next bracket is, or the next matchup is Elton John, Madman Across the Water versus Focus 2/Morning Waves, which, Elton John won this, and if you saw the previous episodes, this is kind of like, this, it's, let's just say Elton John would have better stuff coming later on in his career, starting like 72, 73.
Yeah. You know what I'm seeing here? I'm seeing here an album where it's considered a one-side album, right? And then that's the Elton John, right? One side is good.
Yeah.
Versus an album where it's only known for one song. It's
right.
So I think it's fair that even though this isn't a strong Elton John album, I think it's fair that it beats the Focus, because at least Elton John's got a whole side of the album that's solid versus just one song.
And the other thing is, you got to remember, this is like coming at a time where Elton John was like putting out 2 albums every year. So he was recording like a fiend.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to have some filler when you record like that, unless you're the Beatles.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and similar to my comments on Caravan, I mean, Focus is a kind of a niche taste. I love that taste. Get me some good Dutch prog and I'm good. Again, I realize there are not a lot of people outside of Holland and so forth that are going to be saying that. And maybe many people, in many Dutch that probably will look at that and go, yeah, but Focus? I mean, they're probably the most notable Dutch prog band. But I mean, they're known for a song.
Yeah.
All right, let me do this next one because I feel like I'm the guy who doesn't have a dog in the fight. And this is, but you guys do. And it's like Rich versus Dave right here, I feel like. So we've got David Bowie's Hunky Dory, which I know Dave, I'm Rich. I know Rich is a big appreciator of David Bowie versus Yes is Fragile. And if there's anybody that's the Yes guy in the group, I've grown to be a fan. Rich, you are a serious fan of Yes, but whenever I think of Yes, I think of Dave. So
yeah, of course.
To me, this is Dave's Yes Fragile versus Rich's David Bowie Hunky Dory. And and Rich, it was Fragile for the win. How do you feel about that?
I'm okay with that because Fragile is a freaking awesome album. And I mean, Hunky Dory, it just sets off. It's the first album of the strongest trilogy of Bowie's discography. This he follows this up with Ziggy Stardust. I mean, come on.
Right.
So, which I I like Hunky Dory, but I think I used to say Hunky Dory was my favorite Bowie album, but I think the older I get, the more I am gravitating more toward Ziggy Stardust. So
Nice.
yeah, but Hunky Dory has my favorite Bowie song on there of all time is Life on Mars. So, and then Queen Bitch has like one of the best guitar riffs. I mean, it is such a great crunchy guitar riff. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's a great riff.
But Fragile has Dave. Take it away.
Oh, Fragile just, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, that's the band, yes, comes into their own to some degree with Fragile, and it sets the stage for what they end up doing in Close to the Edge and Tales from Topographic Ocean. They're hitting their peak stride there. All of the band members pulling their weight and throwing in kind of their own unique spin on things. It's a fantastic album, and there you go.
Yeah,
You can't go wrong with Yes at this stage.
Yep. And I don't want to give away any spoilers, but if you are a Yes fan, and particularly of this album, keep watching. Keep watching the rest of the competition.
Yeah.
All right.
So the next one is Pink Floyd's Meddle versus Funkadelic Maggot Brain. I'm going to say that going into this, and where a lot of people weren't necessarily familiar with the Funkadelic album, I'm going to say this matchup was a little bit closer than I think people would have been inclined to say before we started this exercise.
Yeah, I think to some degree. I mean, you also probably, I mean, I'm going to be much more familiar with Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd is to some degree more widely known. They're one of the bands that, they're prog, but you have to remind some people that they're prog because they've transcended the genre so far that they're not stuck, they're not pigeonholed. So when someone says Pink Floyd, even a little more esoteric type of an album like Meddle is, there's still going to be more natural familiarity, where Funkadelic is still to some degree, it's still kind of stuck in its own little niche a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of think that Meddle is kind of like the end of an era, because I think it's the last album of Pink Floyd's, quote, space period, where they were as much of a psychedelic band as they were a prog band.
Yeah.
And Maggot Brain, Funkadelic, is the start of a sound that I don't think gets fully realized until people like Prince comes along in the 80s. So I think you see an album that's way ahead of its time versus an album that kind of shows a transitionary period to, one of the greatest album runs of any band that's ever had.
Yeah. I mean, for me growing up, Pink Floyd's the known variable. Maggot Brain was the new one that was introduced to me through this exercise. So, I defaulted to voting for a favorite, but I did listen to that album, the Maggot Brain, and I really was impressed. And I really, just like you said, Rich, I really was surprised that came out in 1971. I was like,
yeah,
I feel like I'm hearing something way more advanced than that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're great. I mean, George Clinton, he's kind of a caricature because of what, when you look at what he looked like back, when the Atomic Dog era. But yeah, I mean, you can't deny the influence that his band had. So,
I do want to jump back really quick for those keeping score at home. I forgot to mention that on the David Bowie versus Yes contest, that was the first one in the conversation we're having today on this episode where the existing loser beat the new loser. So yes, Fragile had already been a loser earlier in the competition, and David Bowie came down as a fresh loser, but yes, still beat him. Otherwise, we've been having a case where the album that has previously won is coming down and essentially dominating an album that has previously lost, which kind of makes sense, right?
Right.
Previous winner beating a previous loser. So it's interesting to note that, and we'll have that here again pretty soon, but it's interesting to note that Yes has some staying power. So moving on to game 38, which is Badfinger straight up versus Sly and the Family Stone. There's a riot going on. So here's another case now where Sly, he's an existing loser, and yet he and his family defeat the Badfinger, who previously won something. And I think that's okay. That straight up album, I don't know, guys, refresh my memory on what's on there. I don't know if there's a hit on there, but that Sly and the Family Stone record, I found that to be an enjoyable listen all the way through.
It's great. And again, it's like, kind of in that same vein as Funkadelic, is like you have Sly Stone pushing the boundaries of what R&B can sound like and what they can do. This is R&B music escaping from Berry Gordy's empire.
Yeah.
And being able to have the creative freedom to really explore the sound space in ways that Gordy probably may not wanted them to, because it was a risk taker. It wasn't necessarily guaranteed hit from the factory.
Coming into this, I was a little more familiar with the Badfinger, and I probably voted that way. But I think there's at this point, I think Badfinger was treading ground already well trod. To some degree, they're following on, the kind of following the course that the Beatles took. They're doing good at it. They never lived. They never quite lived up to what they were expected to some degree. I think. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
And can you argue that they had already peaked with 1970s No Dice?
Yeah, I think.
So. I also think that the pressure of you also got to remember that Pete Ham was going through some awful stuff too, and so I think those demons really kind of affected the trajectory of the band as well.
All right, so game 39, we end up with Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, up against Genesis, Nursery, Cryme. That's an interesting combination. How often do you spin those two side by side?
This was brutal. Well, I think we talked about this before, but you have two prog albums here.
Yeah.
Prog rock versus prog R&B.
Yeah.
And this one was tough because this is a matchup that the three of us would agree should not exist. Because Genesis got bounced in the first round because of the Elton John record.
Yeah.
So by proxy, yeah. So by proxy, Elton John's responsible for Marvin Gaye losing here.
Yeah, and that's interesting that I didn't expect this because of the fact that the prog rock guys are outnumbered. And, I feel like some of the other fellas in the group that were part of this competition were, more friendly to R&B. So when I saw that Marvin Gaye was going up against, that my beloved Nursery Cryme had to go up against What's Going On, which wasn't as beloved because similar to the Pink Floyd thing, the Genesis album is the one I grew up with. The Marvin Gaye album is the one that I've really come to appreciate as an adult later. And I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? The Nursery Cryme's toast. So it squeaked it out, didn't it?
It did, yeah. And it was tough, and I love Nursery Cryme, and I voted for Nursery Cryme, but I really was not happy to see Marvin Gaye's What's Going On get knocked out this early.
Yeah, and you were a real champion for that album. I remember you really encouraging people to take it seriously and give it a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I consider it the best R&B album ever made. So
nice.
Yeah.
What's so? Okay,
we got one more, yeah. The Doors' LA Woman versus Emerson Lincoln Palmer's Tarkus. So can I just, one thing that jumps out, and it just clicked on me today, is like the keyboard work going on both of these albums in completely different styles. But, the fault is, Keith Emerson is Keith Emerson, keyboard god. Ray Manzarek, I mean, come on. The dude's doing the bass with one hand and the melody with the other, and just essentially playing two instruments at the same time throughout the entire album. Manzarek's awesome.
Yeah.
He's the soul of the Doors, in my opinion. So
yeah, and I think we've already mentioned before that the Doors had, this is not their absolute prime.
No.
I mean, it's a good album, but Emerson, Lake and Palmer were hitting it on all cylinders, and Tarkus is a masterwork. And I think the right decision gets made with Tarkus moving on, and it just makes sense. Sets up an interesting matchup that we will go into later when we finally get kind of a bit of prog on prog. But I think a fair decision to be made here.
Yeah, and this one and the previous one, the Genesis Marvin Gaye, those are two examples where the album that had already lost was beating the album that had previously been a winner. So that's interesting.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Well, that was a quick run through of those 8 matches. The next thing that happened was that we went back up to the winners bracket where there were only 8 winners left. And those winners were put up against each other in 4 contests. So we'll wrap it up right there for this one. It was sort of a loser's episode, but it was a quick one. And like I say, we'll be back up to hang out with the winners on our next episode. So thanks everyone for joining us again. We got Dave, I'm John, and Rich, and we'll see you next time.